Well, hey folks, welcome back to the shop. Today we have this 06 Suzuki GSXR600 on the lift for the infamous rectifier and stator replacement. The way they located these rectifiers on, I think, 2 or 3 year models, starting in 06, I believe 07 and 08. They placed the rectifier right above the header pipe and right behind the radiator, which left no room for cooling that rectifier down, and it overheats. So what we're going to be doing is replacing the stator, the rectifier, some connectors because it smoked and melted the harness, and we'll be relocating the rectifier to a much better place. So welcome back to Butler Customs Motorcycle Shop. Now here you can see the placement of the rectifier. It is right, I'm touching the header pipe right here under this rectifier. It's right behind this radiator as well. So this gets absolutely no air, and they overheat. And then they start melting wires or tearing your ECM up, blowing the stator out, swelling the battery up, bad things. Now there's a bracket you can buy that's a relocation bracket, but it brings it out here. And I don't think that looks good with them sitting out there. So what we're going to do is actually place the new rectifier, relocate it actually underneath the air box. So it's going to be up inside the air box, right under the air filter. So it's going to get a lot better airflow than right here and be protected from the heat. The bottom of this bracket, let me get you in here and you can see actually how close it is. So right there's the header pipe, right there's the rectifier. Just super close, and a lot of heat right here is produced. It tears them up. The harness is on the back side of this rectifier, so it's right above this header pipe and the other cylinder's header pipe as well. I told the customer, let's go with the good Rix electronics. For the Suzukis on a sports box, these are really good. You could buy the OEM ones, but they're 2-3 times more than what you're going to spend on this kit. This kit comes with your rectifier here, your stator, and then it also comes with a gasket for your stator cover. What it does not come with that you will need is the O-ring for your starter gear, or your starter where it goes on the cover. That's got to come out to get the plate off, the cover off for your stator. So the kit doesn't come with it, so you need to purchase one. This is an OEM one that I ordered when I ordered this kit. So it came up, of course, with the seat off, as you saw in the video, but he had taken the air box off as well. He did that because he was riding and he smelled an electrical smell of burning. So he dug into it and he looked, and there were wires melted around where the rectifier plugs in. So these should come with the connectors. Let's actually look at that and see what we've got here. Okay, that's actually our stator there. We'll set this out, and there. That's our rectifier. It has an inline fuse with the fuse already in it, thank you. And our connectors as well. Has a gasket. And then these are our instructions. This kit includes a stator and rectifier regulator. Stator and rectifier regulator are installed in stock locations with direct wiring to each other and the battery. Install stator per factory service manual. Install regulator rectifier per service manual. We're going to be relocating that. Connect the stator and rectifier to each other via the 3 heavy-duty single-pin connectors. Connect the red wire from the rectifier regulator to the positive battery terminal. Connect the black wire from the rectifier regulator to the negative battery terminal. Of course, we'll be pulling up the manual to look at the torque specs on all the things we'll be taking off and reinstalling. So the first thing to do is, of course, get under this tank, and to do that, he's already had the tank up and pinched the breather hose there, but usually there's a bolt in here, and you would undo that, and then these actually slide back, and they may be velcroed on as well, but they'll just slide back off of this tab here. There's a Velcro strip, but this cover doesn't have it. And then we're missing this bolt, and I didn't get any bolts either. We'll do the same to the other side. Maybe he's got the bolts at home. But let me get this one off. Wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle. Now with those side covers off, we can take this top center bolt out here. That is on the very front of the tank. There's a washer there. We'll need to keep up. Now we can just raise this up. We'll stick our block of wood there somewhere safe. Maybe there. And I'll get you in here. Of course, the air box off, so it's going to look a little different than if you open yours up. So you've got your fuel line here that goes to your tank. There's two tabs you'll push in. You'll actually push the fuel line forward and then bring it back out off the tab. There might be a little bit of fuel drip, but it's usually not much. Now you'll usually, if it's stock, you'll have a couple of lines here. This one does not have it. The only thing left now is our pump, and it's just held on with a connector here. You usually have to take a little flathead or a pocket knife and push that tab in to get that connector to come out on you. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and let the tank now back down, and then we'll have a bolt right here. That's a long bolt. That's a 5mm. And then we'll just back this bolt all the way out. That's what our tank kind of hinges on there. All the way out. Now our tank should be ready to lift up carefully, and we can set it out of the way. Okay, so this hose that was sticking out actually goes to the air box. Where were you set? Where were you set? Everything's aluminum on this bike. So check that out. Yikes. Talk about getting toasty. Yep, that's not going to come undone. Our best hope is just to cut here and cut down there and get these out of the way. Luckily, our stator wires run up through here. We'll be rerouting in the same. The air box sits right here. Rectifier connectors will be about in the same location here. Just the rectifier will now be up here in the air box where all this airflow, especially while you're riding, comes in. But I'm not going to be able to get that unplugged. That is probably the worst one I've seen, and it's 1,000 wonders this bike did not burn down. Because if you look here, it almost got into these wires, and I'll probably need to pull this harness back and check this as well. The bike could have caught fire too, and it's right under the tank. So this could have been very, very catastrophic. It doesn't look to me like the battery has swelled up, so that's good. All right, so we'll just get some snips here. Snip that off, and some snips here, just so I can go ahead and get that out of the way. This is really bad. Yikes, look at that. Look how it burnt the wires. Got into here a little bit. I will need to check this out and make sure that it didn't melt these two together. Luckily, it looks like it didn't get into the coil wires. So if you've got a GSXR600 in those years where they placed the rectifier there, it's easy to check. Go out there and look at your bike and look down there. If that rectifier is down there where this one is, even if the bike's running fine, go ahead. Don't replace it, but move it. Go ahead and move it like we're going to do today. You'll be glad you did. It could keep your bike from burning to the ground. I guess unless you want it to burn to the ground. I don't know. Maybe you're upside down on it. I don't know. Okay, now the harness that I just cut out of here, this is actually just the connector from the stator coming in here to the rectifier going out. There's also another connector that's connected to the rectifier, and it is this one right here. And so we'll just pull that, and now it's got 2 greens and 2 reds. So now our rectifier can come out that other side, and I think I'll just go ahead and pull this out. Now to get the rectifier off out of the bracket, just 2 8mm bolts here. We will be reusing these bolts because this bracket does not just hold the rectifier on, as you'll see, it also holds our horn on. What we've got to do is get the rectifier off of this bracket here and then just put the bracket back on, because our horn is located up here at the top of this bracket. So everything will look factory. When you look at the bike, it'll just be missing the rectifier. These are 10mm, I believe. So the good thing about doing this job is, you don't even have to take any of the fairings off, and that's really nice. So let me get my ratchet just sitting in here, and then I'll get my 10mm ratcheting wrench. Okay, why was that not tight at all? Then I'll hold the bolt, get my socket out, and then grab the bolt through there. Okay, so we will be reusing these to go in our air box. Let's do the same thing down here to this side. There's our 10. By the way, how's your day going? What are you working on today? What do you got planned to work on? What projects do you have? Okay, let me get this out of the way here. Grab my bolt. Now we can simply just pull this out, and that's what we're left with. That's the part we cut off that goes to the stator, and then this is our 4 prongs that go plug in to feeding back. Now we can simply put this back up here, and as you see, there's really no difference besides a missing regulator. So let me get some blue Loctite on these little 8s to go back in there. The weather here today still just a little chilly for Tennessee weather. Good fall weather. Got down to about, I don't know, 39 last night. Gonna get up to, I think, the high 50s today. Already I can tell it's warming up quite a bit. Might have to shed these coveralls. Now that most of the weight's off that bracket, all you're really holding on with this bracket is your horn. So you don't have to go nutso with it. I don't know if there's a torque spec on these, but they're only 8mm, so just get them snug. Now that part's done. What we can do, since the airbox is already off, let me show you what it takes to get the airbox off, so then you'll kind of know if your airbox is still on. You will have screws in here that the screws don't actually come out. That's what these little tabs are for. They stay in there, but you will loosen them. You got a connector up here, and then you should have, there's for that big hose that was sticking out the side of the bike. Then when you get this air breather off, and then you'll have these. Now this has a bracket that tightens both up. Same on this. You might have one that's got individual screws in there. So you just loosen these up, and then this whole box slides off. But at this time right now, we got to get into this box and fabricate to put our rectifier in. All right, well, let's see. I'm left-handed. I need to get you on the other side. There we go. And then we're missing 1, 2, 3, 4 back here. So maybe the customer has those. Oh, and then there's one, I think, right down here in this middle hole. Now we can take this off. Whoops, where did that go? Okay, put that back down in there. Now here's our air filter. We can take out. And then this is the bottom of the air box where all the air comes in through here before it hits this filter. And then of course the filter filters the air out and then goes into your throttle body. So now at this time we have to put this in here. And it does fit in there rather nicely. And then what we will do is we will drill some holes. So what we've got to have, we've got to have 2 holes to hold the rectifier in, and then this going to this stator, they are individually, so they're no longer just one connector, which is good, because that way they're not together where they heat up so much. That's really good. So our stator will have 3 connectors here, and then the way they have this wired is that this actually goes all the way back to your battery. So this will be, of course, your ground, and that'll be your hot. So these are long in order to run all the way back to the battery. All right, so what I want to do is make some marks to where this is going to set. Now I've got my wires just run through the air ducts there because I want to make sure that I've got this kind of lined up to where my air filter is going to still seal down. So everything is where it needs to be. Now when you're working in tight areas like this, I find that it's best working on plastics. To keep an old soldering iron with an old tip on it, get it good and hot, and it's smoking, so that looks to be hot. And this will give me the length I need, and all I'm doing is just making a little hole there, and we'll make a little hole there, little mark. Okay, and I can pull this out, and there's going to be my 2 holes that I'll drill for my bolts. Now we've got to run all of these wires through, so we're going to need, you know, kind of an open space to do that. Now when this sits down in here like this, my wires are going to be really close to this right here, so I'm going to just cut out a rectangle right here with my soldering tip, enough to run my wires through there. So my biggest thing I'm going to need is to get this thing right here through. So at least that wide's what I'm going to need, depth wise, at least that depth. So it doesn't have to be exact, so I'm just going to start kind of making a mark here where I want it. It's not going to be the prettiest, but it will work. And again, this is underneath the air filter, so you're not really changing the functionality of this box at all. There we go. I think that's going to work there for us. I can go ahead and go on through there. There you go, just like that. So I'll just keep working around here like that. That way I don't have to use any kind of sawzall, or if you got a Dremel with a tip on it, that might be a little bit quicker for you. This just works fine for me. All right, now that I got my hole here that I'm pretty sure is going to work, I'm just going to take my pocket knife, clean up around here, especially this bottom part here, because you want it smooth to where vibration is not going to, you know, saw that harness into. But it is plastic, it's not like it's metal. Alright, so that's going to be good enough. That's nice and smooth there. Here's all of our trash. And of course, after I drill my holes, I'll go over to the air compressor and I'll blow everything out. Don't want any of that being caught up in here and then accidentally sucking down into your throttle body. That would be bad. Fit everything, feed it through this hole here. And how did I do? I didn't want to make the hole any bigger than needed to be. Very good. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Run that through. Now I'll just feed these through here. 1, 2, 3. And now we can just simply set our nut and bolt up in here. And then our other bolt right in there. I'm going to hold everything together and flip this over and get my nuts started. Since this is being, the nuts are just hanging down here, no pun intended, I do want to put some thread lock, some blue on this, just so they don't back out. Maybe, how about some lock washers? Okay, so I went ahead and blued them anyway. Got a couple of lock washers and my nuts there. And we'll just tighten those down. Now we'll make sure our filter is going to set back down nice and flush, and it does. when this air box goes back on, this screw right here in the center goes down in that. So at this time, this relocation is done. Now all we have to do is hook up our 3 wires to our stator. It doesn't matter which goes where. And then we have these long leads, the red of course to the hot, the black to the negative on the battery. Why are they different than the stock? Well, here's why. They say they separated these to help with heat, because when you put all these 3 close together like this and something goes wrong, or this heats up, or your stator starts grounding out, these will heat up, and as you saw by that connector, it melts everything. And then these have a connector that feeds back to your ground and your battery. What the RIX system does is you no longer have this connector that goes into the harness. This runs just straight to your battery with a fuse, inline fuse. So it's supposed to help reduce the heat and the failure. Also, when we pull that stator out, you're going to find that that stator quality of the RIX is a whole lot beefier than the OEM stator. Okay, now we're ready to start taking off for our stator. Make sure you have an oil pan down here. You will need that. Make sure you have a big magnet. You will need that. And these are 8 millimeters. Now this cover will not come off unless you remove this cover right here, because there is a bolt like this back behind this cover. So we have to take this cover off first. Oh my goodness. Why are these not tied at all? That one was loose. Like I could have probably turned it with my fingers. Has somebody been in here? Could be. Maybe somebody replaced the stator with like a eBay China stator, and that's not good. When it comes to your charging system, especially something that could burn your bike down, you don't have to go OEM. They make better things like this that we're putting on that I think is even better than OEM. But don't go cheap. Don't buy a $30 stator. Now somebody's RTV'd this, so they have been in here. Instead of buying the gasket, they RTV'd it. So I'm going to get a little flathead in here just to break this free. They slopped it on there too. Now be very careful with pulling this off, and I'll show you why here in a second. Okay, when you pull this off, okay. Wow, all right, usually it doesn't happen, but everything came off together. There is actually an O-ring that sits down in this groove here. You can actually see the O-ring still in there. And instead of replacing the O-ring, they just RTV'd around it. Sometimes when you pull this gear out, what you're going to find is that this little bitty washer that's on here, right here, this little wave washer, will actually stay there, and it might even fall down in there. So you got to be careful of that, because when we go to put this back in, we're not going to put it in like this, because you'll drop this washer down in here after you've put your new gasket on and torque things down. But now we can go ahead and pull this cover off. Now when we do that, there's another gear in here for your starter. You have the starter, then you have this secondary gear that runs on your starter motor gear. That turns this bigger gear. That actually turns this third gear, which then turns your crank. When you take this cover off, the only thing holding this gear on is this cover. So that could fall out as well. That's why you need one of these to just maybe kind of hold things together while you pull that cover off. We'll just break these free in a crisscross pattern, and there's that bolt that you have to remove in order to get the stator cover off. Want to be careful not to drop that bolt. Of course, we're pulling this cover off, so if you do drop it, just find it. It'll be down there. Now this cover is not going to fall off. It's kind of, I guess what you'd say, magnetized by that rotor. Okay, now our cover is ready to come off, and remember, you got that gear there. Breaking free pretty good now without a lot of pressure. There we go. And I think my gear is actually staying up in there. And you'll feel some resistance because it is magnetized. Now we can pull our wire on out that we cut off. And there's our old stator. And there's the gear. You want to make sure either stays in there or you can take it out, but it's on this teeth here. Now the way that this works is this is a one-way gear. So it will spin free this way. So it constantly rides on that crank gear. But when the starter motor gear turns it the other way, it will not go. So that'll actually crank the bike. I mean, you do have this rotor that kind of catches it. The rotor magnets look good. They're encased in this housing, so you don't have to worry about a magnet falling out. Okay, so here on our stator, you have a bracket down here that actually holds the stator grommet into place. This is a 4mm, and then your stator bolts that hold the stator in are 5mm heads. They should be. So we'll pull that up and out and kind of set it over there. We'll go ahead and get this gasket up and off, and they did RTV that as well. Looks like they maybe just did a light coat on it, so that's good. And we'll clean all this up as well. And those were torqued in there good, so that's good. So first bolts I've run up on that have felt like they've actually been torqued in there. Now these bolts are not torqued to yield as far as I know. You can reuse these. The kit does not come with new bolts. Now the stator is just ready to lift up and pull up out of the grommet there that it sits in. So as you can see, I just think it's a lot better quality. Now I don't know if this is OEM or not. It just bit to dust. And when you look at the ends of the coils here, man, they're just really nice. Really nice. It's got a little initial there, a check there, the part number there, a check back here, the 3 separate wire system, just even the harness and the cables, the wiring feels better. On this starter gear cover, if you look, that O-ring in there is super flat. So when you do this job, go ahead and spend the extra 10-15 bucks and get that O-ring replaced. Case cleaned up best I could, sprayed out all the gasket stuff off. Pay special attention to this groove here. If somebody used Gasket Maker or RTV, you will need to clean that little groove out. That little groove is important because as you set this in, this will seal around that groove there. It's kind of like a double gasket, one on this side and one on that side. You could use some RTV there if you wanted to, if it made you feel better. Understand that this here presses up against the cover and the case of the bike, so it gets pressed in pretty good. You usually don't have any issue with it. And now of course your wires will run under the stator. I get that set in there nice and flat, and then my holes actually will line up. I've already red or blue Loctited those, and I'm just gonna kind of get them started in there just to hold down my stator. These are torqued. The manual says to, it's weird, I saw one that said 7 foot-pounds and one that said 8 foot-pounds. So I'm going to go with the 7 because I don't want to crack this case. And so with the blue Loctite, it should be good. I'm just going to get these just kind of down on here. And this is a little bracket that is going to keep my wires down out of the way of that rotor that's going to be spinning around the stator here. The stator doesn't move, but the rotor spins around it. So you want to make sure that your wire is down in the little channel that that it's supposed to set down in. This is 7 foot-pounds as well. Now let's see what we got. 7 foot-pounds is 84 inch-pounds. Is that right? There we go. And now you want that to be just like that. You want that metal bracket to be, your wires to be absolutely under that. That way these wires cannot come up. If it's setting, let's see, if your wire is not in this, inside of this, and inside of this, then you need to stop before you put this bracket down and get those wires up under there, okay? And with new wires, it can be, you know, a little stiff, a little tight. And I'm just going to do 84 inch-pounds on these as well. Now this is done and ready to go back on. I did get the dowel pin out. Just took some vice grips to the side carefully and wiggled it back and forth. It had RTV in there. That's what was keeping it from popping out. The reason I did that, I went ahead and put it back on the bike because it's easier to get this cover on, because as you draw this cover on, it's going to all of a sudden jump on there because of the magnets in that rotor. So it's easier to do with the dowel pin on the case than with it off. Now the starter cover, the manual said, I put the new O-ring on, and the manual said to use grease. Use a Suzuki grease, which I do not have, so I just use kind of an all-purpose grease instead of oil. I'm not sure why that is. You Suzuki guys, let me know what the reasoning for that is. But now these are ready to go over to the bike. We've got our gasket over there. The cover bolts are torqued to 7 foot-pounds as well. We got our new O-ring on here that is going to set on this cover. And then on the starter as well, there's an O-ring. We got that on, and I greased that as well. And I'll show you, there's a couple of places to put RTV, not grease, but gasket maker. So I'll go over there and show you where the manual says to put that. The gasket goes on dry. So I want to put the gasket on dry. I've got it all kind of cleaned off, smooth. I'm not going to put anything in this. I'm just going to do it how the manual says to do it. Here's why. When you put this on, this has to be spaced. There's not much tolerance. And you want the fit to be according to the manual, especially with the starter gear and all the shims and stuff with it. I'll show you that when we go over there. Okay, up here on the starter gear itself, the actual starter, there is another O-ring there, and then I did grease that up. The manual says to put RTV gasket maker. I use the Erling high temp gray, and you put a dab there where the case joins together, and you put one over here as well. So that's the only two spots the manual says to put your RTV on. You will have some oil that's still kind of dripping out. The rest of the surface has been cleaned best I could. Now when our gasket goes on, there will be RTV in those spots. It will actually, if you press on them and with the dowel in, it'll actually hold that gasket up there. And now we're ready to go up with this. We're not going to worry about this wire yet. Our main focus is this idle gear, the starter idle gear, and the pin that goes in it. We want to make sure that's still there, and that pin is going to ride right there in this slot. There's no washers or spacers or anything like that. So we're going to try our best to get this all lined up. There's several places you want to look, and like I said, it'll just kind of magnetize on there. Now when it's on there and everything's lined up, our starter gear up here for the starters lined up, the dowel rod or the rod pin sleeve, whatever you want to call it, for this gear is lined up, and you'll see there's kind of this gear moves a little bit and it's not completely flat yet. So just take your fist, give it a good pound. You'll hear the tone change. Then you can also just take your rubber mallet, go around there. I'm blue Loctiting these as well. These will be 7 foot-pounds in a crisscross pattern. There was no torque sequence. Now I want to start right up here and kind of get that drawn in a little bit. So all I'm going to do is just make sure all these are lined up by getting them started in their holes. All right, now that they're all tightened up, we'll just go through and torque. 3, 4. Okay, I do not like how that is feeling. Okay, I'm going to stop there because I do not like how that's feeling. But I think it's where that rubber is. So do I keep going? It's always scary. And this thing right here, I don't trust this anymore, and that always scares me. Okay, let me run back around one more time just to check our torques. Yes. 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 Okay. We're good. Now it's time to put our other starter gear in. And I want to show you something on this. So you have this gear. The big teeth, of course, go back here to mesh with this gear. The smaller teeth go up here in your actual starter. There's a hole here for this pin right here to go into. Now there are some things that go on that. You have this roller bearing, this needle bearing. So just check it, roll it with your fingers, make sure it feels good. That is actually going to go in this hole with the pin here. Then you have a flat shim washer. Then you have this wavy shim washer that goes on that. Now I have found that it is easier to go ahead and put it all together and to push this up where you have the most shaft left back here. Then I'll take this magnet and I'll magnetize everything together so that my washer does not fall off. Then I'll carefully put this up in here. Now you might have to wiggle it and move it around. You might have to pull it back out and try to move that starter idle gear around, because this shaft right here should poke out, and it is not. I'm in up here, I can see that, but I'm not in that gear back there in the back. So I'll pull it off, I'll check, make sure I got everything. I'll kind of move this around a little bit. I want to play with it until I find where that gear is going to set up in there, just like that. So once that's in there and this is poked out now, you are ready for the cover to go on. We've already put our new O-ring on, we've already greased it, and then this little shaft here fits in this cutout here in the center. All right, I think that worked. So it'd be a lot easier if this was on a rear stand where the bike's setting up. That gear would not keep sliding down on me. But it's on there, and the new O-ring popped in good. These are 7 foot-pounds as well, 8mm as well. I did blue these. Okay, and we'll torque these. Now I want to clean up under here. That way I'll know if anything is leaking on me later on down the road. But everything went back together really, really well. Now what I like to do, and with these off, I just want to crank. And I'm not going to crank long, I just want to make sure my starter gear in here is actually working. All right, very good. Okay, now we can just take our wires here and route them back up where the other wire went, up around here. Be careful of the throttle cables. And we lost maybe about a half a quart of oil out of the stator cover. Now when we go back with this box, there is a sensor in top of the air box that we will need to remember. Okay, it is this. There's also 2 other relays that'll kind of snap into the top of the box. So we'll get this up here. There's also a vent breather tube for the air box over here on the side. And there's one right here. So when you take the airbox back on, you'll want to be aware and put this back up on there and have these up out of the way. Now where the old rectifier hooked up, we're not going to use this anymore. So you could just cover this, you could tape it up, whatever you want to do. It's a female connector, so there's nothing exposed. So usually you can just kind of tuck it up under the coil wires harness, and it'll stay there kind of out of the way, and you don't have to worry about that. We got our 3 stator wires here that will hook up as well. We can go ahead and hook up our stator wires here. They don't matter which one you hook up, they are all the same. So there's 1, 2, 3, so they all produce the same outputs. Now for the rectifier going out, this is going to run back here. And I'll get this tucked down in there. Now I've got this vent hose over here. Goes to the right side of the box. There's a little nipple on it. Just get it fitted up in there. I'm going to go ahead and get these relays just kind of setting in the little slots up here. I might have to wait on that one until I get my airbox down. So now I just want to line up my boots here. Now what I want to do, use a little nature's lubricant, also known as spit, just to run around there. Now let's see what we've got. Oh yeah, oh yeah. I'm happy with that. I like that, and that's up out of the way. Very good. Now all we got to do is just tighten these up. It's a tight fit, but with a little yeep, 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 you can do it. 3mm. That's on. Now we can plug our sensor for our airbox in, and that other relay now should fit up on the little stand for it very nicely. There we go. Beautiful. All right, let me get these two tightened up, and then we'll just slide this back up on here. All right, and with this, 3mm is going to take me about 5 years to do, so I'll be back with you. I was able to take a little 3mm socket and get down in there just right there. I did have to take a screwdriver and hold the clamps right. I'll show you what I did on the other side. And then here on this side, I just took this sensor off this grommet here, and then I was able to get my ratchet in there as well. So all I gotta do now is just snap this thing back down over there. And now we're good. Now we do have these that runs to the negative and the positive, and we'll run them up underneath here. One on that side, and man, that just, yeah, it fits, but just a little tight. Not too bad. Okay. So I'll get these hooked up. Okay, so I got the tank back on. I got the fuel line hooked up. I got the fuel pump hooked up. I got my pivot bolt hooked up. Now it's a good time, while the tank's up, just turn the key on, let the bike prime, pump, and what you're looking for is any kind of leaks. Come on, baby. Okay. So everything looks good. Okay. Now we can go ahead and let the tank down and put the bolt in at the top. Okay, got my tank set back down on the side fairings on. Before we put the seat on, let me crank it up and you tell me if it is running or not. Let me get on the other side. So I gotta hold the clutch in. Go ahead and get the power on. Hold that in. In case you're wondering, that's a part number for the Rick's Motorsport Electrics new Suzuki charging kit. There's the number there. Of course, listen, don't take my word for it. Look your bike up, verify on the website that that fits your bike. But I have to tell you, It worked out really good. Well, I was going to put the seat back on and I noticed there was something stuck up in there that wouldn't let the seat go up in. Bag of bolts. The airbox bolts and the bolts for these covers here. So I'm going to raise the tank up and put the airbox screws back in, put the seat on and put these bolts back in. So, but I won't waste and bore your time with that. Waste and bore your time. Well, there you go. We did it. Not only did we get a very good upgrade on the stator and the rectifier, but we also moved the rectifier where we get much more airflow now. And it is charging, as you saw, really good. Again, if you got one of these, just go ahead and at least move it. That's a good mod you can do. Now they fixed it, I think, in 09, I believe, so 06, 07, and 08. I might be wrong on that, but I think they fixed it in 09. So all that's left now is just to put top the oil back off. It looks like I lost about a half a quart. So I'll top that off, and besides that, it's good to go back home. Going to be a beautiful weekend. He's going to be happy. It's a new customer of mine that was referred. I was referred to him. So I think he's going to have a good time this weekend. Also, so I thought you only worked on Harleys. Nope. I work on any motorcycle except a two-stroke. I don't work on four-wheelers. I don't work on two-stroke. I don't work on ATVs, small motors, lawnmowers. Nope. Nope. Any kind of bikes, I'll work on them. And I have a lot of fun doing it too. You know, when I was a teenager, my seat's going down. Okay. Well, how far is this thing going to go down? You know, when I was a teenager, I had posters on my wall, and it wasn't posters of iron heads and pan heads. It was sports bikes. It was fun sports bikes. Thank you so much for hanging out in the shop with me today. And tell your mama and them I said hi. Can I get out of this? What's wrong with my seat?